I would like to present our moderator for today. Her name is Professor Barbara Kingsley Wilson from CSU Long Beach. Barbara, take it away.
Hello, thank you very much, Ashanti. I'd like to introduce our four panelists. Carolyn Burt is the EIC of the Corsair newspaper at Santa Monica College. Zane Meyer Thornton is the web visuals editor at the Western Kentucky Herald. And Blake Atwell is a sports reporter anchor for University of Miami Television. And Christian Pineda is the CSUN broadcast student and editorial assistant at KCSN 88.5 FM. And thank you all panelists very much for joining us across many time zones. I'm going to start, the thing a lot of people are wondering who have dealt with the newsrooms as they are in the last year is what's been the hardest thing about being a student journalist during the pandemic? Blake?
Yeah, I'll start. Hello, everybody. I would say that for me as a broadcast journalist, I think as a student, it's hard enough to get access to certain people and to get access to certain locations to shoot B-roll and interviews in a non-pandemic time. And then you add the pandemic time and the access just becomes like very, very restricted. So I think as a student, that's been one of the hardest things is just the fact that the whole medium in which we tell these stories, you have to rethink it and you have to get more creative because your ability to go to certain locations, to see certain people completely changes now because everything is virtual.
Blake, have you been doing interviews on Zoom for broadcast often?
Yeah. So what's funny about that is that I'm a sports anchor at UMTV at the University of Miami. And with that being said, most of my packages are about sports. And most of those interviews that I have done for those stories have been through Zoom. And then with B-roll and stuff, you're relying a lot on other sources other than yourself to get footage. You know, there are certain things you can still shoot at a distance, but most of it is courtesy footage from like athletics and things like that. So it completely changes the way you tell these stories because a year ago right now, you know, you could go to a baseball game and shoot footage or a basketball game, and you can't necessarily do that anymore. So it's very different.
Yeah. I know at our paper, the Daily 49er, the students sometimes don't get access to games. They're just ramping up now. And they've had to use a lot of old photos and old things for old images for their games. Has anybody suffered from that as far as covering sports among our panelists and how have you dealt with that?
I'll take a crack at this one. So ours is definitely a different scenario. Normally at our sports games, particularly basketball, for example, we have photographers along the baseline and they're able to just shoot the game normally. Now with the new regulations put in place by our school, we have to shoot from the first row of the stands. And so it's a lot different. The angles that we're all used to using are a lot different, but we're trying out new lenses and it's turned into kind of a fun thing for the staff. Like people are starting to incorporate the crowd more and just trying to get as creative as possible. I think what Blake said there was really important. A lot of the times we don't have the ability to get the content that we're used to getting. So we have to think outside the box a little bit. And while it's challenging, it can also produce some really great results.
Are there people in the stands there, Zane, for the games?
There are a few people in the stands, but it's much smaller capacity. I believe our school operates athletic events at 25 to 30% capacity. And social distancing is enforced as well as masks and everything.
So a challenge there as far as visuals. Has anybody else had to get around and found a creative way to get around the rules as they are? Carolyn?
For us, we've mainly been using photos for sports games, at least, ones that we took years prior. If we had players that were reoccurring, we would dig through our previous semester's Google Drives to find any photos that we could. It came really in handy this past election season. We had photographers on our staff who had covered the rallies for Biden and for Trump. So we had a whole album of photos we were able to pull from in order to use for our coverage of those events. But that's been the main resource we've been using as a staff, is digging through our own photos first to see if we have anything that works for it. The other resource I would say is in trying to provide a visual for those stories is really leaning into infographics and illustrations to find a more outside of the box way of helping to tell the story.
Oh yeah, our staff has too, and I'm trying to find what's the really fun little thing you can make things on for
Canva, probably.
Canva. Oh my gosh, yeah.
I feel like Canva's sales has probably skyrocketed this past year. Like Zoom
Higher
and
than
Canva,
Zoom.
both of them.
Yeah, it's like they make Canva jokes, and I'm the Canva queen and stuff like that. And I know even that is as great a resource as is, where you can create visuals for the top of your opinion piece or your news story when you can't get out and get pictures. Has anyone, I want to get back to especially covering like the Black Lives Matter protests and other protests where there's lots of people around. I want to pivot a little and ask, how have you dealt with going out and covering things, especially when the pandemic was at its worst? How did you do that? Kristen, did your radio station or newspaper deal with that? TV?
Yeah, so KCSN, each writer would have these little snippets that they would have do. We called them like COVID minutes, where they would cover their own stories. And that gave everybody a lot of freedom to cover a wide variety of things. But at the same time, because everybody got to pick and so many things were happening, we would get a lot of different angles from which, like if say 4 different people covered the same protest, we would get different interviews from all of them, and they would just be so much different sound. Thankfully, since we're all just behind a microphone, it's a little easier to not need imagery, but definitely making sure that they stay safe was a tough priority to manage because, we can't go out there with them. But everybody tried to be as safe as they could, mask up and stay at safe distances. But the pandemic provided its own unique opportunities to cover stories in a different way than we used to be able to.
Yeah. Anybody else, when they're covering protests, run into any, I don't know, how was that for especially the other media covering the protests, covering whatever protests? How did that work for your news organizations?
For Santa Monica College, we had a lot of protests going on here in Los Angeles. So the way we went about it was any photographers, any staff members who were going to cover the protest, they needed to let both our editor-in-chief and managing editor know. They were put in a group chat and would give us updates every 30 minutes about where the whereabouts were. We were trying to pair them up with other members of staff, so that way they had someone to stay in touch with if things were starting to look more serious. They were told to leave immediately. That was our number one priority, was their safety. So even the days that a curfew was enforced, we just told them to go home. They got what they needed. Don't stay for the sake of the story, just head home. So that was really important to us.
Did you get pushback on that, or they said, okay?
For the most part, staff members were very understanding about that because they knew where we were coming from. There was a little bit of pushback of the adrenaline of being on the scene and wanting to cover it. But when push came to shove, staff members understood where we were coming from.
Right. Huh. Interesting. Are there some stories that you found after a year of this almost, that are easier to cover now, now that everybody Zooms and so many things are available in that format?
If I may. So we used to have much fewer interviews because handling them on the phone was much more tedious than recording a Zoom call. And now that everybody has practice and everybody sounds much more natural behind the microphone and behind the camera, not only have we gotten more of them, but the quality has skyrocketed, right?
Huh.
And that goes on the interviewees end too, right? If you're asking them questions, they are a little more comfortable answering them because we're getting more and more used to this.
Interesting point. So that now you have an easy format and people who are used to doing business in this format. So you actually get more interviews, you get more sound bites from your guests.
Yeah, more, and they're usually a lot better because once people get comfortable talking on Zoom, it's just like you're sitting right across from them.
Interesting. That is interesting. And Blake, were you going to add to that?
Yeah, so I think that some of the people especially from a TV perspective, that you wouldn't usually have access to. Just as we were talking about before, as that being a challenge, it can also be a blessing at the same time. Because we've gotten to talk to people on the news side and especially on the sports side that we would not have a chance of talking to if it weren't for Zoom. Like just last week, I was able to interview a professional basketball player who's playing in Greece right now, who graduated from University of Miami last year. And that would not have been possible because if we weren't in the situation we were in, with Zoom being as big of a deal as it is, people wouldn't be as Christian was saying, as sort of like well coached with it. Like if you were to tell somebody a year ago, hey, like we're gonna do this interview on Zoom, they'd be like, what? It's like, wow, it's different. And when you say, hey, can we do this Zoom interview? People are a lot more understanding of that. And I think people are a little more gracious with their time as well too, from my experience.
Huh, that's interesting. Did anyone want to add to that from our group?
I'll chime in. I've definitely found that conducting interviews is much easier on Zoom because people are at home for the most part. So it's easier for them to have that commitment of their day to hop on, but they definitely feel more comfortable with it too. It's also easier just from the technical side of things to be able to press record right there on the app and have a copy of what's been said, and then being able to transcribe that's gotten easier too through this virtual environment. We found tools like Otter or Google Pinpoint that have a written transcription of the entire dialogue too, making it much easier to find the quotes after conducting the interview.
Yeah, Otter is a wonderful thing. I will, where the transcription has gotten so much better. So yeah, and all my students love it. And the free app is pretty fairly generous on that. On Zoom. What do you think, Zane?
Well, my Zoom coverage has been really limited. Honestly, in terms of coverage for me, not much has changed because we just need to be in person for anything visual related. But when I was looking over this, I would imagine meetings being a little easier just because it's easier to just log onto your computer than go somewhere. You can message someone directly through there and communicate with them through that.
Okay, before I shift, anybody want to add to that? I wanted to share a little bit, just a couple visuals on this. On this from the group here, including some safety measures. Here's our bunch here. And Christian, you want to talk about this a little bit? You were doing a demonstration video.
Yeah, so typically what we were able to do at the radio station was we could bring our anchors in and show them how everything worked. But because of social distancing procedures and making sure everything is clean and safe, we couldn't really do that. So I got the idea to set up a camera and just record a run through of the process and how things had changed in COVID world. And funny story, the first time I put on that face shield, I put it on wrong, and I didn't realize it until I was halfway through editing the video. So I had to drive back to the studio and put it on right and record it again because I had the foam on my chin, and I don't know why I thought that was right. But it also was incredibly helpful because instead of spending time right before the shows to show the anchors how everything worked, we could prep them with the video right there. It's just like, here, you're anchoring on Tuesday. Here's Monday, you get the video, right? It's 30 minutes, take a look. And if you have any questions, you can ask me when you get there. So it cut down a lot on the need to explain, and everyone's first times went much more smoothly than they had in previous semesters because they have like a primer to fall back on.
Huh, that's cool. You guys, I will let Christian or anybody else who wants to answer this. How many of you are gathering in the newsroom in a regular basis? Just chime in. Are any of you?
We, so at UMTV, we have various different shows. And we don't really have like, in-person like a big UMTV meeting or anything that happens. So it's a little different than your typical newspaper newsroom. But we have been recording all of our shows since the fall, in person, socially distanced. If you're in the control room, you're in a face shield, just like Christian is here. in this photo. And then if you're in the studio, the only people that are in the studio are the camera operators and the on-air talent. And the rule is that if you're not on air, you have to have a mask on. So even if you're, the sports anchor and you're waiting to go on, you have your mask on while you're waiting, or your weather or whatever it is. So that's sort of the way it is at UM.
Huh. I know we were in the newsroom for a while, then we weren't, and their masks would be on, but then the food would come out and the masks would come off, and sometimes they'd stay off. Anybody else gathering in person nowadays in their newsrooms?
We haven't been gathering in person since last March. I think that's partially because we're a newspaper publication, so we don't need to do on-air stuff. But it's definitely made it an interesting situation where we're now in our second staff, where it's a group of people who will never meet face to face.
Yeah.
But we meet regularly together on Zoom.
Okay, I'm going to ask you about that a little bit, Carolyn. Here's some work the students are doing at your newspaper. You said this is your year in review. I was going to ask. I was going to come back to that in a second, but what are some of the work, I want to ask about some of the work you're proud of and how you collaborated on it to make it happen. Carolyn, do you want to start first and how you put this year in review together with some nice visuals? And
Sure. Right as you mentioned my name, my neighbor started using her leaf blower, but luckily it just turned off, so I think I'm good. So we're a newspaper publication. So we do both our online website of the Corsair Online, but we also have continued to do a print publication of the Corsair instead through a virtual PDF. So luckily we already had the tools for that, where we were uploading a digital version of the print edition to issue. So we've just continued to do production days every other week to get out a PDF. And that's mainly for the experience of our staff. We wanted to be able to provide our staff with the tools to understand how production days work. And so this was a part of our final issue of last semester. And we wanted to have a part of it showcasing 2020 because this was such a big monumental year for a lot of us. And what we realized was that so much happened in this year. It was hard to remember what happened what month, where you were like, oh, right, that happened in March and that was in April. So what we did was we worked together as a group to go over all the things that we could brainstorm happened. We did that by looking over the photos that our photographers had submitted and just looking over our news stories as well. And then after each month, we had our bullet points. We assigned them to staff writers to help work on. And then all throughout our production day, we had our read-through team looking through them, seeing if anything monumental was missing from that month. As we were doing that, our photo editor was pulling the photos that felt like we worked best for each month as well. So it was a really cool project of, it's this big photo story that has, I think, about 6 different writers and showcases so many of our staff photographers as well.
What did you use to collaborate on that, Carolyn? Was it Slack or?
So we have a Zoom meeting that just runs all day on production day. And the way it works is for our read-throughs team, one person will share their screen of the Google Drive and they'll look over the article document to read through it, see if there's any errors with it, that it all makes sense. And then we also have our layout team who is on InDesign. Each person is doing a different page. And then once they've finished their pages, they'll upload those to the Google Drive for the person who's hosting it to then download it and rearrange it as need be. And then at the end of the day, we do a final look. So that's when the person who's been hosting the entire layout, they'll share their screen for everyone to look at the whole piece of the latest issue as a whole and go through it as well.
Wait, you're on Zoom all day?
All day.
How does that work?
Our class starts at 9:30 a.m. and for this issue, we didn't log off until 10 p.m.
I mean, so you're all in your houses and doing your work things, right? And then
Yep.
And you have your computer right there plugged in, I guess, because it's going to run out of power. and you're doing it all day. That is amazing to me.
Yeah, it's very tiring. We've learned that moving forward, we need to have set times to remind everyone, okay, go have lunch, go take a walk, go just rest your eyes so that way you're not looking at a screen all day. But it
Wow.
really speaks to the dedication of our staff that this is a project that they want to see continued and that they want to do to the best of their ability as well.
Wow. That's very interesting. This is also, you did some on the California propositions, nice and
Yeah.
visual thing there.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite things that's come out of the Corsair since I've been on the staff. So this was done by two of our staff members, Sonia Hugh, who was our design director, and Michael Goldsmith, who's actually on this call right now, is one of our staff writers. And so this was when I was managing editor, working with our editor-in-chief at the time, Jack Hughes, and we wanted to do an issue that was mainly covering the election. And so one of the goals we had in mind was breaking down the California propositions for our readers, because many of them are new voters and it's easy to look at the propositions, get overwhelmed and not want to vote. And we wanted it to be done in a way that they could easily understand what it meant to vote yes, what it meant to vote no, who was endorsing each side of things. So we brought this to our two staff members and they cranked this out over the course of a weekend, I would say. There was so many hours put into it and it just turned out like a work of art. I think it's one of the coolest things we've ever done.
Wow, that's wild. That's really nice, and it's really colorful and stuff. I still can't get over all these Zoom meetings.
It's a lot, but you just adjust and get used to it.
Anybody else want to talk about some work they're proud of? I don't have visuals of everything, but here's the I'm getting ahead of myself. Anything the other three panelists want to talk about that came out better than you thought it would? Considering the restrictions that were in place. Any stories?
Yeah, the Herald, we had some really comprehensive coverage of the George Floyd protests that occurred just nationwide. So all the students at Western got sent home about a week and a half before the protest started. So we put out, like, when everything started going on, we put out a call and we're just like, hey, if you guys are comfortable and plan on documenting these protests in your city, like, let us know. And so we were able to get photo coverage from like Nashville, Louisville, Bowling Green, Washington State, St. Louis, Missouri, just tons of places. And it made it so our presentation really showed the unity that was like just occurring nationwide after this terrible event. And we definitely would have been able to get the coverage that we did if everyone was still in our little town in Kentucky. So we got pretty fortunate during that, for sure.
That's interesting. Anybody else, Blake or Christian, any little successes that kind of even surprised yourselves?
Yeah, like I had mentioned earlier, we had these little COVID minutes that all the writers were doing. And as the semester had been going on and on last semester, you could really tell that the writers were hitting their stride and finding their voice, and seeing them develop from some of the earlier stories in the pandemic to some of the later ones, it was astounding. So much more was focused on community and just how folks were banding together and persevering, and especially around last winter when things were rough. It was nice to have that sense of solidarity and such a vote of confidence from every single one of those writers, as they'd just been getting more and more confident in their own abilities, and you could really tell that they were growing as reporters during this time.
Huh. That's interesting. On the other side of that, is there anything you wish you'd done differently? Is there a story that didn't go exactly the way you wanted, or you thought it was going pretty well, but it didn't turn out the way you wanted and you wish you'd done things differently, or even a newsroom process that you'd wish you'd started earlier or done differently? Does anybody want to chime in on that?
I can start. I feel like we all have little things that we've realized over this year, but for us, switching to a semester that started completely online, whereas the first semester last year, where we had a month on ground before we went online, one of the things we realized is we were missing out on that face-to-face communication, not just when we're in the classroom setting, but that time beforehand where you're setting down your backpack and you're getting to talk with the student sitting next to you. But with that also, we were missing out of like bond outside the classroom environment, our staff would used to do like game nights or movie nights where we'd watch something related to journalism or even going bowling, and we weren't having this team bonding moment. So luckily we realized it about halfway through the semester that we needed to do one of those. And so we did a game night playing Among Us online. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that game, but it ended up being like a big success where it was a spontaneous thing where it'd come up in class and we asked if anyone wanted to play and we all hopped on the Zoom call playing it. But it made us realize if we had done things like that right at the beginning of the semester, it would have prevented some communication problems that were starting to happen later down the line.
That's interesting. That's a good point. I know our staff tried Friday happy hours on Zoom, and they did a mixology thing or something with drinks, and that worked for a while. Then it petered out after a while, but especially the one right before Christmas, I think that was pretty big. Does anybody have any other things that maybe they wish they did differently, or anything they wish they did differently for starters?
I've definitely had something I wish I had done maybe earlier. When we switched to social distanced writing and everybody had to start recording their own stuff, it became apparent that we probably should have put together a little crash course on audio editing, just because everything was so new. Everybody would try to record at their best, but background noise or just, practicing dictation and all of that. I wish I had put together something a little early and been like, here are the steps. CSUN provides the Adobe suite. So this is how Audition works. Here's how you can filter some of that noise out, and just stuff like that. Oh man, if I had a time machine, I would sell myself. Don't stop at the board video. Tell them how to work Audition.
Get rid of that excess noise. Yeah. So you would have maybe had a kind of a plan for, okay, this is how you edit, and this will help you. This will make your life easier. Just do these things. And
yeah, absolutely. And I guess that's one of the things that I missed from in-person editing. It was harder to get one-on-one time with all the writers, just because we were all so spread and there was so much to do and so many deadlines. So I also wish I could have done that differently.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about. The contact has to be so deliberate. You used to, have an email, or you'd have a Slack thing saying, please do this story, or Kamiak or something. And then you'd see in the newsroom, how's the story going? Or you meant to tell the editor something and you don't have that. You don't have that running by the newsroom and sharing French fries like they used to and whatever, and it has to be so deliberate, and it takes so much work to reach out. And sometimes the newsroom processes, things wouldn't get done, or people would hunker down like we all are, and they think the editor won't listen to them, or they start things like that. How have you dealt with newsroom harmony? Aside, I know there's some of the social things, but newsroom harmony, anybody who worked in the business, it's an up and down thing. But how did you work on that? Just in communications, to make sure you were communicating enough to get the job done and keep each other sane?
I would say for me, I think that I have an interesting perspective because I transferred from SMC to the University of Miami, like in the middle of the pandemic. I had never been to Miami in my life before coming here. My communication with UMTV was that I reached out to the station manager and was like, hey, here's who I am. I'm coming to school here. And that was a scary and interesting process. I think that I got really lucky though, because what's clear about UMTV to me is that a lot of the communication structures and things that were in place before the pandemic have sort of stayed alive during the pandemic. And it's allowed us to sort of have an environment where somebody new like me can come in and get to work and help the team. So I think that it's more of a reflection of just how cool of an environment the U is, because they have a sort of a rotational thing where new people come in, other people leave, and I know that the Corsair is the same way, and it's really cool. And I think that as hard as the pandemic is, at least for me, it's being in this transition period of coming here. And I'm sure there have been people that have come into SMC and joined the Corsair that have seen the same thing, that even though things are virtual, really good collaboration can still happen and you can still put out really good content.
Huh. That's interesting. That's interesting. Anybody else want to add to that from our group?
Yeah, kind of jumping on with the Corsair, it's definitely that environment that I would say our staff right now is mainly people who have never even set foot into the newsroom, which is crazy to say, but we've really stressed from the beginning of we're in this virtual setting, over communicating is key. Like text your editors as soon as you upload the first draft of your article so that way they know to go check it out. We don't want things to just linger on and go unsaid. We've found that it's much easier to just address it, and then if there's miscommunication, we can address that as well and find solutions instead of making it into a bigger issue later down the line. I think it's also really important that our returning staff, we've stressed to them to be welcoming, to shadow the new staff as well, to make sure that they're not getting lost behind and getting confused and stuff, to make it an easier setting for them.
Yeah, so being very, very over, almost communicating too much, right? To make sure that, you know, you're on the same page.
Sometimes it does feel that way, but it's all in good reason, I would say.
That's interesting. Are there anything you might continue, you know, that you might do, what you might keep doing after we're all together again, or together as much as we're going to be? Any practices you might keep doing for newsroom organization and that you like?
I definitely love some of the Google programs that we've started using. We have two things at the Herald called a print layout and the print story tracker. And the print layout just shows like what story and what photo is going to be on what section of the paper. And the story tracker basically just keeps every editor updated on like how far along in the chain of commands each story is. So if the story is completed and it's waiting on being copy edited, that'll be color coded. Or if the story's done, but we're still waiting on the visuals, that'll be or color coded. So if I go in there looking for an update on a story, I can just easily tell right away. Another thing that I think was really beneficial to like the visual storytelling that I've picked up on during the pandemic is web design layouts, like interactive web pages. And I think being able to incorporate different text breaks and different types of ways to incorporate photos and videos and audio quotes into more of like an immersive experience rather than just like text on a page with a few photo breaks here and there, can really create like a great medium to tell stories.
That's interesting. I know Linda with CSUN talked about a virtual newsroom that they use. Has anybody, Linda, do you want to mention that, talk about more about that, or anybody who's done that, a virtual newsroom thing that that they experiment with? Does anybody use those? I don't know if you're there, Linda. But I thought I'd like to know more about that. I know that they have done things like, you know, that week of welcome and stuff like that, and they'll have, you know, they'll talk to potentially new people, and that's kind of as virtual newsroom as we get, but we don't, as far as an outreach tool, but we haven't had a virtual newsroom. I'd like to hear more about that.
I'll jump in real quick. The little bit that I know about it is that the Zoom link is open all day, maybe from 9 to 9 or something. Maybe Linda put it in the chat already. And the advisor, the professor who oversees the paper is there, ready to help answer questions. I think the students just jump on and off all day long.
That's interesting.
Yeah, Barbara, hi. It's nice to see you.
Hey, how you doing?
At CSUN. You know, this has been really interesting because we have several face-to-face classes, but 3 of them actually. And the Sundial was going to be face-to-face, but students have opted not to come into the newsroom. And so I think the publisher was challenged by just the number of students and kind of dealing with them one-on-one. So he hit on this idea of just opening the newsroom every day from 9 to 9. And it's really been a boon to him because students have wanted to drop in, and they come in for periods of time, they stay, they get advice, they talk to each other, they socialize. And it's just, it's like being in that building community, I think is really what it's about. And it's proven to be helpful to him and to the students as well. So I think, you know, you don't have to, he isn't on it all day long, obviously, and not everybody is, but you know, it's a place where people can go and talk to each other. I think it's kind of like what Carolyn was talking about in terms of, you know, just that community building that is, you know, I've been really worried about that because, you know, everybody, I think in a student newsroom, you know, there's so much that goes on there, that bonding, that, you know, you build lifelong relationships there. And if you can't have that, then something really critical is lost, I think. And so, you know, I'm really happy to hear that the virtual newsroom is being successful, and it's a fairly new thing. He just started it recently, but it's, you know, it's been popular. So, you know, good is what I say.
Just physically, I wonder, because if Zoom, if nobody's on there for a while, it shuts you down. I might call him up. I wonder how they keep it open. Maybe they just click something in the setup or something, but I just wonder.
Yeah, I think you can do it the way you set up the invitation. And maybe you know, it has to do with what the structure is in your technology at your institution. But I don't think that's been a problem. And so I don't know if you know Ardley Ward. He is
I do.
And so, you know, I'm sure that he would be happy to share with you however he's managing that. But
yeah, I think that would be good. I am going back to the PowerPoint a second, but thank you. I do want to add, that is a very interesting concept. It seems long to me. And I know I do a lot of my communication in phone conversations and texting. Here's some other tools. A lot of people are aware of Slack. And this is from you, Zane, I believe. Is it?
Yeah, this is one of our Slack conversations.
Was that a big thing with you guys before the pandemic? And how is your use? Could you explain Slack a little bit in case some people don't know what it is, and also explain your use pre-pandemic and during pandemic?
Yeah, for sure. So Slack is a great way to keep in contact with any and all members of your news team. If you look on the left side here under channels, there's a bunch of different chat rooms for people to talk in. So we have our general chat, and that's just everybody that's on staff. And then we have our photo staff, and it just gets into more subgenres from there. We've always used Slack over at the Herald just for any type of communication. If it's like, this is going on right now, there's a fire on campus, we need someone to get there. It's a great way to get in contact with all of your staff, but it became much more vital during the pandemic. We require people to respond to our messages on there, whether it's just like a thumbs up or something, but it's really one of our only ways to get into direct contact with our whole staff, given all the changes and everything. So it's really important, and it's really helpful to just kind of keep things organized.
How many other panelists use Slack?
I've used Slack for work, but not at school.
Okay. Christian or Carolyn, do you use it?
No, we use 3 different sites for our communication. We use Kamiak for our newsroom stuff, and then we use WhatsApp for communicating with our staff for the most part.
WhatsApp, not regular text, huh?
Not regular text. That's proven to be really helpful though, because it's a one-stop shop to get all of your texts about the news stuff instead of filtering through your text with your friends and family as well. But yeah, this is Kamiak, which I know a lot of other newsrooms use as well. And it's proven to be really helpful for us of uploading our articles through. You can see once you've uploaded a draft of whose desk it's on, whether it's your section editor, copy editor, managing editor, editor-in-chief, or the digital editor who's going to upload it onto the site. This site, the page that's on right now is the pitches form. So this is also in addition to the article being uploaded on here. This is the site that staff members use to pitch their articles to our editors too. So they can see if it's been approved or not. They can see if there's been any comments left on it. It's just a very one-stop shop for us for the articles.
And pitches, yeah, it's nice for that. And it's very transparent as far as the editing process, I understand.
Yeah, you can leave little notes in it, which are highlighted in orange so the writer can see exactly where they need to go and fix something up. It's also great for me as editor-in-chief to just see an overview of what's happening for every section, how many stories we have, where about they are, how far along.
Yeah. I know they're not cheap. We just got them, and they do negotiate on price if anybody's interested, but they're not a cheap newsroom software. But have you had them a long time at your place?
As long as I've been on staff, we've been using Kamiak. So I know Blake was on the Corsair before, so he can speak to
Oh,
how
really?
long they've been using it.
I know all about Kamiak. Yep. And I know Zane does too. And Zane was there before me. So,
Just all Corsair up in here.
oh yeah, gotta represent.
I think I might not have got the whole name of your newspaper there. It's the Herald. Sorry.
Or it's called the College Heights Herald.
Sorry,
That's the
College
official
Heights
name.
Herald.
No, it's okay. Don't worry about it.
So is this something different from the usual Google Doc thing? You said there's a story tracker. Is this an add-on kind of thing that Google has?
I'm not entirely sure. I think it's something in Google Docs. I think it's just the spreadsheet format.
Oh, okay,
I didn't make this particularly, but yeah, I believe it's just a Google program.
Okay, I thought it looked, yeah, because it looks like sheets. It just added colors to it and stuff like that. But is this your kind of go-to for organizing in Western Kentucky at your newspaper?
Yeah, definitely. This is kind of like our one-stop shop for getting updates on wherever any story that's currently in the process of being published goes. So you can get in contact with the reporter, the photographer, and then you can also just kind of see how far along the story is and when it's supposed to be published. So this is much like Kamiak for the Corsair. We just use this to make sure we're staying on top of everything and we know what's getting published when.
I know the editors in previous years more, I think, had to do a fair amount of nagging of the editors to put your, update the budget, because some of them would be real on it and some wouldn't. How is the nagging factor on and making sure this is updated? Are they pretty good about it at the Herald, or are they not?
Things fall through the cracks, but what I've noticed about everyone who keeps us updated is our editor-in-chief, Laurel, will message we have a editor's Slack chat, and she'll message the group chat something funny like, today's a great morning to update the story tracker. And then within like 5 to 10 minutes, it'll all be filled out. So yeah, we forget at times, but just a quick little reminder and everything gets situated.
Yeah. Okay, nice color scheme there too. We're going to open up for questions in a minute. Hold on one sec. I want to check my questions. Okay. All right, cool. Let's if you would, Blake, would you talk about I believe this is for UMTV, is it not?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So as I mentioned a little bit before, we have successfully been able to conduct all of our shows at UMTV since the fall semester. Back in the spring before I got there, of course, just like every other school in the country, the students were sent home. But basically at the University of Miami, we were tested every week. So if you test positive, you're immediately obviously removed. And I think it just goes to show how responsible and how seriously pretty much everybody that works on these shows at UMTV takes it, because we were able to get through the whole semester last year without missing much of any shows. We did miss a couple towards the end, but all in all, we had a very successful semester. And this live shot, which it was a live shot, is from News Vision, which is our weekly live newscast that airs at 7 p.m. on Thursdays. And that's what this was a stand-up outside of the Watsco Center, which is where we play basketball.
And you had to do remote for your internship too.
Yeah. So I interned for the last year at NBCLA. Even this summer when I was in Miami, I interned with them as well, and that was all remote. And then I interned for CNN Sports, which is based out of Atlanta, remotely, like from Miami. And what this photo is that even though I interned remotely, I was able to pitch a package idea, and my bosses ended up letting me go shoot the package in the subject's apartment, socially distanced, as you can see, with masks and everything. So interning remotely is an interesting experience, but I think that there's still opportunity even during a pandemic, to do some cool creative stuff.
That's interesting. Speaking of that and careers and everything, how does this experience of the last year, how has it and your newsrooms dealing with it, how has it prepared you, do you think, for the real world?
Just
not?
being able to adapt to anything for the most part, I would say. That's been the real lesson we've learned, is to just take a minute and say, okay, this is not going how we thought it would. How do we fix this? How do we still find a solution in this?
So being able to shift, and maybe doing it quicker because you've had to, is it kind of the emotional things like, okay, you got to put this away and try something else, or kind of moving quicker to
yeah, I would say that just trying to problem solve quicker. We're not on ground. So I guess that's been a good thing too, is just always being on your feet, ready to go, not being thrown off just because, oh, I'm not in class and all of a sudden this has come on my plate, just knowing that it's going to come up and just be ready when it does.
Interesting. Anybody else?
I think that the pandemic produced a pretty pivotal thought process for me. There came a point where things out here were starting to open up with social distancing mandates, but people were starting to go out to bars and restaurants and things of that nature. And I had kind of like a profound thought of, I think, being able to realize that that's still not a safe thing to do, and that I need to limit my social exposure to ensure the safety of myself and also the people I work with, and also be able to continue to document my community as much as possible, was a really profound experience for me, because it really put everything in perspective. It's like, this is what's important to me and my future, and I need to put all the other kind of social aspects of college to the side until the vaccine rolls out and things are safer. And I think my classmates who took on a similar thought process were able to still produce some really great work, but I saw some of my classmates kind of struggle a little bit, whether it's they tested positive and they couldn't work on a project for a couple weeks or things of that nature. So I think the pandemic really made it so we can focus on what's important, or see that we're desiring something else.
Thank you. That's very interesting. And yeah, thank you for that. Anybody else want to add to that from our four? Blake or Christian?
I just want to retweet everything they both said.
Yeah,
Amen.
there's so much overlap.
Looks like there's a question in the chat from Marissa. Do your campuses keep you and your staff from covering stories as freely as you'd like due to COVID restrictions?
Good question.
I hadn't seen any in particular restrictions aside from clearly staying safe, right? They didn't want anybody on when the protests were happening, they didn't want anybody up at the line of police or anything. But other than that, it was pretty much you cover what you can, and the only restrictions set in place are by where you're going.
I'll just chime in. The CSUs were quite locked down, really, and they, at first, especially in the fall, they were like, don't let them cover anything live, and if they absolutely have to, make them fill out this legal thing, So we did do that for a while, and I won't get into all of it, but we were trying to say, they're going to have to cover some things, but have to do it safely. And if they're comfortable, we had, a photographer who is busting out, trying to cover protests and stuff like that. And eventually we did let him, and he signed the form and he did it, and other things happened unrelated to COVID, but it was a little bit of a struggle because the CSUs were locked down, really, and not having any in-person classes. Oh, I mean, okay, a few, very few, like 1%, 2% of the whole campus in our case.
Yeah.
So we had some challenges. I'd like to hear from some of the others. How about, how was it for your newsrooms?
Our campus doesn't get a say so much in what we cover. The main thing was that we weren't allowed to be in the newsroom itself because of the shutdown of the whole campus being shut down. I think at the start of the pandemic, the only program that got allowed back was the nursing program that SMC offers. So really that was the only difference for us, was just not being able to be on site. We were still able to cover stories. It was just more communication between writers and editors of what they felt comfortable doing and making sure that safety was being followed, of socially distance, wearing masks and all of that. But that's pretty common sense among our staff.
Okay. Zane, what did you find?
Yeah, we had a pretty big discrepancy with our school. We were trying to document. We had one of our dorms on campus called the Barnes dorm be used to house students who tested positive, and we wanted to document just kind of how that was, how they were like getting their assignments from class and their meals and everything of that nature. And we had to jump through quite a few hoops. One of my co-editors, Sam Mallon and Gabby Brokema, did a really great job of kind of working with the department and enabling us to get access, but it took a few weeks for sure, and we almost didn't get it. So,
But you did get it.
yeah, in the end, we got it. I think the Friday before the publication came out on Tuesday, so right in the nick of time.
Oh man, it's like a movie. That's funny. Ashanti had a question, and I lost my chat for a second. Looking back, thinking when everything was shutting down and everything was remote and doing the simplest thing took a lot of work and many Zoom meetings. Did you think you'd be able to do the things you did? And did you, kind of going back to, did you surprise yourself on a couple of things, and what did you learn from that besides the pivot that you talked about? Was there times that was there things that you didn't think you'd be able to cover that you did?
I'll start. As far as the Corsair, it was never a doubt in my mind, at least, that we would stop doing production days, that we would stop creating articles. That was always like my mindset of, we're going to keep doing this and finish out the semester strong. But for me as a journalist, I did not see myself being editor-in-chief of the publication. And that's become like a silver lining in all of this, that I was able to be it, because I actually transferred to CSUN in the fall. So I'm taking classes both at CSUN and at SMC. And because everything remained online, I had the blessing of being able to stay on the Corsair for the fall semester and return as the managing editor, because I saw the position was still open, and I just thought it was such an incredible opportunity to be able to continue my time with the Corsair. And since all it was hopping on one Zoom call to another, it wasn't like I had to commute all the way from Northridge down to Santa Monica instead. So that's been a real big blessing for me, was being able to return last semester. And then as that semester was finishing up, my mindset was still just focused on the semester ahead of being like, okay, I'm going to be taking these CSUN classes. And then again, everything remaining online, I was like, well, my classes are all on Zoom, editor-in-chief's available. This is not what I ever thought I would be doing, but I might as well try it. And it's just been such a delight being able to be holding this position now.
That's great. So maybe open up a bit of an avenue there, sounds like.
Definitely.
How about you, Christian? Do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, if you asked me a year ago what I thought it would be like, I never would have thought I'd make it here. and when the pandemic hit, I was worried for the station. I never thought we would stop, but I was shocked to see just how well we adapted and how quickly we moved and how well we did. And not only am I so proud of my own work, right? Everyone else that I saw working, they grew so much so quickly. And if I'm being perfectly honest, I was very surprised to receive this invitation. And then there were other points too. Like when I made that video, I thought like, oh, it's just going to help the anchors out, right? And then I'm getting emails from the journalism department, and like Professor Bowen reaches out, and I'm just sitting there shocked that it's all moving still.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Remember that when you get older, you might surprise yourself. And that's one silver lining. I hope there was a couple here. Does any final thoughts before we say goodbye that that we didn't cover from you guys?
I just wanted to kind of going off of that last point. So when I transferred to UM, didn't know what to expect or what UMTV would be like. I had heard things about it, but within literally the first week of me being in communication with them, I found out that they were working on a 30-minute special to commemorate, honor, and profile the ongoing social justice movement. And we ended up as a team virtually from all over the country, Atlanta, California, where I was, Miami, New York. We were able to put together a 30-minute special called Black Voices Matter. And one of our anchors, Trayvon, actually anchored the special from Atlanta. And I just think going off of like what Christian just said, I mean, I had no idea what to expect. And then it was just such a cool introduction to all of these people. And it's really cool because I think it, like what Christian said and the experiences I've had and Zane in Kentucky and Carolyn at the Corsair is that just like this pandemic, as challenging as it's been, has shown how like determined student journalists are and what we can get done no matter like what adversity you throw at us. So it's been a challenging time, but I'm proud, just like everybody else is, of what we've done.
Well done. Does anyone add to that? Thank you, Blake. That was really nice. Okay. Thank you so much. I want to thank all of you for coming. The panelists, you all added so much to this discussion, and we applaud you and your efforts and your resilience and the opportunities you found and developed and flourished in. And everybody smile because I'm going to take a picture on my computer. Smile. Hello. And thank you so much. Thank you, SPJLA, for the opportunity. And I wish everyone a wonderful evening and keep on fighting.